We did it. We did it. We got it done a day before the matches started. We did it. We have finished simulating with all the updated rules, the complete European qualifying playoff, 100 simulations. We have the results. We have beautiful data. It's going to be fun. Unless you're North Macedonia, of course. This sort of thing takes a team. Massive shout out to our entire simulation team, which includes Tyler as part of the Excel, but it's not just Tyler. I do some of the simulations, but there's also a team listed here of fabulous individuals that allow us to do these 100 simulation videos, and particularly difficult this time because we had to turn this information around incredibly quickly. But hold up, this is a simulation of the European World Cup Qualifying playoff. This has never happened before. If you want a brief explanation about what is going on, then you can check out this video that came out a couple days ago where I previewed this upcoming qualifying window. Essentially, you've got 3 groups of nominally 4 teams, and 1 team is going to come out of each of those groups. That's what we have. Group C obviously being like terrifying if you're North Macedonia. The reason we had to turn this stuff around so late is because, for incredibly obvious reasons, Russia has been suspended from this qualifying playoff, and there were debates and appeals about whether they'd get back in or they'd be replaced with a team, and it ended up just giving Poland a bye, which means Poland has a bye in the first round of the playoff. So the playoff bracket looks like this. So you have this lineup. Poland's already in the final, and the Ukraine-Scotland match, because Ukraine is also in the playoff, has been delayed until the next international window, which is in the summer. At least we think. It hasn't officially been scheduled yet. So that also delays technically the final between the winner of Scotland and Ukraine and the winner of Wales and Austria. Even though Wales and Austria are going to play this March. Obviously, this is an entirely unavoidable collision between tragic world events and sport. And I know I am no authority for tragic world events at all, and that's not why you came here to hear me talk about it. I do have a full statement on why we're not talking about it and what you should do to help the world on my Discord channel if you want to check it out on the announcements section. But as for the war in Ukraine, that's all I'll say about it, and we'll get back to the actual numbers and the fun of the simulation. Because like I said, it was fun. So Tyler has worked some absolutely tremendous magic. Oh, just because I know you're going to ask, we made a custom database for this. We didn't let the game call these people up because it actually wouldn't have done it the right way anyways. So it was the most recent international call-up for each of these teams. Huge shout out to our database team, which is Read the Mead and Whelp. They do fantastic work, and they set up the simulation team for success. Right. And first, who the heck qualified and how many times? We'll start at the bottom. Out of 100 simulations, North Macedonia qualified 0 times. 0. They never once won 2 games. Ever. Like once. To their credit, they did make 2 finals, which means in 98 out of 100 simulations, Italy beat North Macedonia in a one-off game. Football Manager does not like their chances at all. In second place, perhaps unsurprisingly, we have Turkey. Turkey qualified 7% of the time, which is obviously respectable considering where North Macedonia ended up, and considering, to bring it up again, this is their group. They have to play Portugal, and then very likely they have to play North Macedonia. That's not true. Even though it was one of the 2 finals that North Macedonia made, they actually played against Turkey. Obviously, North Macedonia lost and Turkey won, and they got through 6 other times as well, managing to beat Portugal. Coming up third from the bottom is the Czech Republic. Only made it through 15% of the time, which is weird because in 4 consecutive simulations that I did, the Czech Republic did actually qualify in all 4 of those simulations. Apparently, I was rigging it for Czechia. I'm pandering for a sponsorship from the Czech Republic Tourism Board. You might be wondering where Wales is. Well, they're directly above Czechia. They finished with 16 qualifications out of 100 simulations, which is fairly respectable. I mean, Wales, even in Football Manager, where you have those British Isles teams that get kind of inflated, is just not super good, but they did manage to play their way out of Group A 16 times. You know who else did? Ukraine. Made it out 16 times, which, considering how well they seem to do in a lot of Football Manager simulations, felt low to me. But Football Manager's not liking their matchups they get against Scotland or then against Wales and Austria in the next round. Those matchups did not shake out well for them. for one particular reason that we will touch on when we break down the advanced stats. Next spot, right in the middle of the table, 5 teams below them, 5 teams above them. That would be Austria. Qualified exactly 33% of the time. 1 out of every 3 simulations, Austria was going to the World Cup. So congratulations to them. And then above them, a team you probably expected to hear about earlier, 35% for Scotland. Give it up to my boys. The Scots dropping 35%, which is the best out of Group A. As you might have noticed, they were the top team out of Group A, which very clearly was denoted, as we can see in this qualified percent range by qualifying group down in the, go down to the bottom left, Reese. Sorry, Reese, I didn't mean that. You're a wonderful editor, and we couldn't do this without you. But bottom left. We see that Group A only has a qualifying range here at the top, less than 0.2. And that's the range between Scotland and Wales. And that would be a 0.19% range of qualification. That means this group, by far, we're not going to show the other 2 groups yet. There's more disparity. And in Group B, we have our next contender. That would be Sweden. Now, Sweden's got to play 2 games, but they qualified 35% of the time out of Group B. You got to beat the Czech Republic, and then you play Poland in the winner-take-all situation. 35%, though, respectable. Next, and this one will surprise you, Portugal. Portugal only qualified 37% of the time. Oh, like a lot of Portuguese people watch this channel. Love you guys. You make the streams great. You bring the energy. This isn't what you wanted to hear, and I'm sorry. 37% of the time you qualified for the World Cup, and that was it. Poland, in a weirdly exact mathematical situation, qualified exactly 50% of the time. 50 out of 100. They have to play 1 game to get to the World Cup, and whether it was the Czech Republic or Sweden, it was a freaking coin flip. But that puts them second behind Italy, who qualified a filthy 56% of the time. Not only did they manage to beat North Macedonia 98 times, but in those 98 finals they made, they won over 57% of them. And these are stuff that we actually have on our table right here. They scored over 2.2 goals per match throughout the course of the entire qualifying, and were the only team that conceded less than 1 goal on average per match throughout 100 simulations. The only team. Next closest team was Portugal. Even though they finished with just 37% going through, they averaged only 1.08 goals conceded. The interesting note about Poland is even though they qualified 50% of the time and are above Portugal, they had a negative net goal difference of 0.02. They allowed just 0.02 more goals than goals scored. Another surprising note, Sweden was a goal machine. Scored more goals than Portugal and more goals than Poland in the entire simulation, an average of 1.75 goals scored, and they had the second best finals conversion rate of any team. Better than Italy, better than Portugal, better than Poland, obviously. Sweden won 58% of the finals they made, which means if they got through the Czech Republic, they were just better than Poland the majority of the time. This pales in comparison, though, to Scotland, who won 59.32% of their finals. Obviously, that could be against either Austria or Wales, but Scotland only made 59% of the finals in this simulation and qualified 35% of the time. Now, I am bad at math, and that's why I hire people that are good at math. But I know that that is significant and more than, a 50-50 split playing against the team from the other group. So shout out to Scotland. Scots also played pretty impressive defense, far and away the 3rd best defensive team outside of Italy and Portugal. They were actually only 0.05 goals against behind Portugal. Then Austria, which did win 56% of the finals that it made, which feels almost contradictory, but basically means they were dominating Ukraine if Ukraine got to the final. And Austria scored a bucket of goals, 1.68 goals per match. It was actually second in the entire simulation, even though they were down in the middle of the qualifying table. But this brings us to Ukraine, and the reason that they were so tremendously unsuccessful, their defense was just as good as Sweden's defense, better than Poland's defense throughout the course of the entire tournament. But Ukraine scored a paltry 0.97 goals per match throughout the course of the tournament. That's hard to overcome, especially when the teams that qualified at the same level as Ukraine, Wales, and Czechia averaged significantly, like 0.4 more goals per match throughout the course of the tournament. Ukraine, according to Football Manager, is really going to struggle to score. Not as much, though, as Turkey. Turkey, obviously, the Turkey in particular is a good team, tough draw, 0.79 goals for, 1.81 goals against, and made 17 finals. So they beat Portugal 17 times, which is a lot better than North Macedonia, obviously. They won 7% of those. Well, they didn't. Wait, hold on. Math is creeping up on you again, Sealand. Take a breath. They only won 41% of those finals, 7 out of 17. And then, of course, North Macedonia, which, look, Italy was obviously the best team here, combined with North Macedonia being the worst. And North Macedonia averaged basically 3 goals conceded throughout the entire tournament. They did have a lead in one simulation in the final. They managed to beat Italy 1-0, and they were ahead 1-0 against Portugal, but Cristiano Ronaldo scored 2 goals, the second in the second half, to break North Macedonian hearts and rob them of their only win in qualification out of their group. The disparity in Group B was fairly significant, but the gap between Poland and Czechia was 35%, which bumps that way ahead of Group A. But of course, Group C, we had a range of 56% to 0. There is very little parity in Group C. You knew that. If you combine the 2 qualifications of Italy and Portugal, you end up with 93% of the time Italy and Portugal are getting out of the groups, and Turkey seemingly the only team that can spoil the potential European champion versus Ronaldo qualification party. As for which group had the most goals, weirdly it wasn't Group C, with Italy and Portugal just abusing the other 2 teams in the group. It was Group B. It was the only group to average over 1.5 goals per match throughout the entire simulation. But for the real deep dive nitty gritty stuff, we've got one more fun set of facts for you. And this was almost a point of interest. We tracked how many games went to penalties. 11% of the games in our simulations did go into penalty shootout. This means essentially one of the matches that we're going to watch throughout the course of this whole thing is going to go to penalties. But who was good at penalty shootouts? Best penalty shootout team? Sweden. Sweden won 65% of their penalty shootouts in this tournament, which included 11 penalty wins. Austria won 60% of their penalty shootouts, including 12 penalty wins. Ukraine won 52% of their penalty shootouts, but won a penalty shootout 13 times. And, well, Scotland won 44% of their penalty shootouts, 45 before rounding, but they won 13 penalty shootouts, so they were involved in a lot. On the flip side of that, Italy was involved in 12 penalty shootouts and won 6, and so was Turkey. And Portugal was involved in 18 penalty shootouts and won 9. But if you look at this right column here, you can see an interesting stack up. So the player selection, as we mentioned earlier, was the actual national team call-up for the most recent national games. And if you average the penalty attribute of the first 16 players from that, where the players are most likely to be on the field, that's what you see on the right. The best penalty-taking teams, Italy and Portugal, only won 50% of the time. Of course, they were probably going against each other, but we do see a pretty natural trend with a bit of a fluke in Sweden that the worst penalty attributes closer to the bottom. Except for Czechia, only won 27% of their shootouts, even though they're apparently a pretty good penalty shootout team. Scotland, be nervous if you're in a penalty shootout, because that's not a good number. And that is all of the information that we could squeeze from this data. If you love the simulation, I have great news for you. We did one of the Premier League fairly recently. You can check that video out right here. But for the European playoff, first round kicks off today if you're watching it in the first day. So have a great time with it. This is all the data you need to inform you who's good at offense, who's good at defense, who does Football Manager think is going to get through, and what chance does your country have to actually get through as well. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I kind of need to go watch it now. And long may the United States actually qualify for the World Cup, because we don't have to play Trinidad and Tobago this qualifying window, so we're looking up. Here we go.